Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Let me start with the bombshell that dropped like a Minnesota thunderstorm in January. Carson Wentz is back. Yeah, you heard that right. The quarterback who was supposed to be a footnote in Vikings history, the guy who spent last season as insurance before a shoulder injury shut him down, just signed a one-year deal to return to Minneapolis. Now, before you dismiss this as just adding another body to the practice squad, let me tell you why this move is way more significant than it appears on the surface. This isn't about keeping the bench warm or providing emergency depth. This is about creating the most competitive, pressure-packed quarterback room in the entire National Football League, and the ripple effects are going to be felt from the coaching staff all the way down to the rookie water boys. Think about what's happening right now in that building. You've got 3 quarterbacks, 3 former high draft picks, 3 guys who've tasted success and failure at the highest level, all competing for the same job. Kyler Murray walked in as the presumed starter, the polished veteran with proven production and playoff experience. McCarthy represents the future, the young gunslinger with unlimited potential but limited track record. And now, Carson Wentz enters as the wild card, the experienced system quarterback who knows Kevin O'Connell's playbook inside and out and isn't content to fade quietly into retirement. Every single practice rep becomes a referendum. Every throw, every read, every audible gets analyzed under a microscope. Nobody can afford a bad day. Nobody gets to coast through training camp. The competition isn't just fierce, it's relentless. And that kind of pressure can either forge championship-caliber leaders or fracture team chemistry into 1,000 pieces. Here's what keeps me up at night. What does this move say about the organization's confidence in McCarthy? Look, I'm not suggesting they've given up on the kid or written him off as a bust before he's even had a fair shot, but actions speak louder than press conference platitudes. When you bring in a veteran quarterback who's started meaningful NFL games, who's led fourth-quarter comebacks, who's been through the gauntlet, you're essentially admitting that you're not ready to bet the entire season on an unproven commodity. That's a safety net. That's hedging your bets. And while that might be smart organizational management, it also sends a message to McCarthy that the leash isn't as long as he might have hoped. Every interception in practice gets magnified. Every missed read becomes a talking point. The margin for error shrinks to almost nothing when you've got 2 experienced quarterbacks breathing down your neck, ready to pounce at the first sign of weakness. Now let's talk about Kyler Murray because his situation just got infinitely more complicated. Coming into this offseason, most analysts penciled him in as the Week 1 starter without much debate. He's got the resume, the stats, the playoff appearances, but comfort is the enemy of excellence, and Carson Wentz's arrival just obliterated any sense of security Murray might have felt. Now every snap matters. Every practice session becomes a showcase. One bad stretch, one string of poor decisions, and suddenly you're looking over your shoulder at a quarterback who knows this system as well as you do. That can be motivating or it can be suffocating, depending on how Murray handles the psychological pressure. Some quarterbacks thrive when their job security gets threatened. Others tighten up, overthink, and spiral into inconsistency. Which version of Kyler Murray shows up in training camp might determine the entire trajectory of Minnesota's season. And let's not forget about Max Brosmer, the 4th quarterback on this roster who suddenly finds himself squeezed into the smallest possible corner with almost no pathway to meaningful playing time. With 3 legitimate contenders in front of him, Brosmer's margin for error doesn't just shrink, it basically disappears. Every mistake echoes twice as loud. Every missed opportunity feels like it could be his last. That's the reality when you're fighting for roster spots in a hyper-competitive environment. The NFL doesn't give participation trophies, and quarterbacks who can't separate themselves from the pack get cut without ceremony or sentimentality. This quarterback situation screams one thing above all else: insurance policy. The Vikings got burned last season when injuries derailed their rhythm and exposed their lack of adequate depth. They watched helplessly as their backup plans crumbled and their offensive continuity evaporated. They're determined not to repeat that nightmare scenario, so they've loaded up with talent and experience, creating multiple contingency plans for every possible disaster. That's smart organizational thinking, but it also reveals something deeper about their mindset. This isn't a rebuilding team content to develop young talent slowly over multiple seasons. This is a win-now roster that believes its championship window is open right now, and they're willing to create internal competition and controlled chaos to maximize their chances of capitalizing on that window before it slams shut. Here's the kicker that nobody's talking about enough. 3 former top draft picks in one quarterback room isn't just unusual, it's practically unprecedented in the modern NFL. These are guys who were supposed to be franchise cornerstones for other organizations, players who commanded massive investments of draft capital and coaching resources, and now they're all fighting for the same job in Minnesota. That's a bet on talent, sure, but it's also a pressure cooker that could explode at any moment. Egos clash. Playing time gets divided. Frustration builds when guys who are used to being the unquestioned starter suddenly find themselves in legitimate competition, managing those personalities, keeping everyone engaged and motivated while knowing that 2 of them won't be playing on Sundays. That's going to test Kevin O'Connell's leadership skills in ways he hasn't faced before. So here's the million-dollar question for Vikings fans everywhere. Is Carson Wentz just an emergency backup plan, or does he have a legitimate shot to win this competition and become the starting quarterback? Can he recapture the magic that made him an MVP candidate earlier in his career, or are those days permanently in the rearview mirror? And most importantly, does this 3-way battle elevate everyone's performance through competition? Or does it create division and uncertainty that poisons the entire offense? The answers to those questions will define Minnesota's season before a single regular season snap gets played. But hold on, because while the quarterback drama dominates headlines, there's another seismic shift brewing that could completely transform the offensive identity, the running game. For years, Vikings fans have watched as the ground attack generated solid production without ever quite reaching that explosive, defense-terrorizing level that championship offenses possess. Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason are professionals who execute their assignments and move the chains. But let's be honest, they don't strike fear into defensive coordinators' hearts. They don't force safeties to cheat toward the line of scrimmage. They don't create those home run plays that flip momentum and demoralize opponents. That's the missing ingredient, that difference between a functional running game and a dominant rushing attack that controls games and wears down defenses over 4 quarters. Enter Jeremiyah, the Notre Dame running back who's been climbing draft boards faster than anyone expected and generating serious buzz inside the Vikings' war room. This isn't casual interest or routine scouting diligence. Multiple reports indicate Minnesota is exploring the possibility of trading up from pick 18 to pick 11, specifically to secure Love's services. Let me repeat that for emphasis. They're considering surrendering additional draft capital, giving up future assets, to move up 7 spots and guarantee they land this particular running back. That's not window shopping. That's not tire kicking. That's diving headfirst into the deep end with complete conviction that this player can transform your offense. Why all the urgency? What makes Jeremiyah worth that kind of investment? Let's look at the tape and the production. Over 1,300 rushing yards in his final college season. Touchdowns piling up week after week. But more importantly than the raw numbers, it's the style and versatility that make him special. Love isn't just a between-the-tackles grinder or a speed demon who relies solely on athleticism. He's a complete back who can catch passes out of the backfield, pass protect when necessary, and most importantly, create explosive plays that change games in an instant. He's got the vision to find running lanes that other backs miss. He's got the acceleration to hit those lanes at full speed before defensive linemen can react. And he's got the power and balance to break tackles at the second level and turn 5-yard gains into 15-yard chunk plays that keep drives alive and demoralize defensive units. Now imagine plugging that kind of weapon into Kevin O'Connell's offensive system. Picture defenses already stressed by Kyler Murray's mobility and improvisation skills, already stretched thin trying to cover Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison on the perimeter, suddenly having to account for a running back who can gash them for explosive gains on any given play. That creates impossible math problems for defensive coordinators. Do you commit an extra defender to stopping the run and risk getting torched by Minnesota's elite receivers in single coverage? Do you play your base defense and hope your linebackers can somehow contain a back with Love's combination of speed and power? There's no right answer, which is exactly what great offenses do. They force defenses to choose their poison, and every choice leads to something painful. But here comes the debate that's splitting Vikings Nation right down the middle. Is it worth surrendering draft capital to move up for a running back in today's NFL? The analytics community will tell you running backs are replaceable, that you can find productive ball carriers in the middle and late rounds, that investing premium picks in the position represents poor resource allocation. And statistically, they've got a point. Running back careers are shorter and more injury-prone than almost any other position. The position has been devalued across the league as passing games have become increasingly dominant. Smart front offices build through the trenches and the secondary, not through the backfield. But here's the counter-argument, and it's one I find pretty compelling. When you hit on an elite running back, when you find one of those truly special talents who can carry your offense for 3 or 4 years before Father Time catches up, the impact is immediate and undeniable. Look at what Christian McCaffrey did for San Francisco's offense. Look at how Derrick Henry transformed Tennessee into a playoff contender year after year. Look at what Saquon Barkley brought to Philadelphia. These aren't just good players producing solid numbers. These are game changers who fundamentally alter how defenses have to approach your entire offensive scheme. They're players who can take over games in the fourth quarter when defenses are exhausted and demoralized. They're the difference between 3 and out versus sustained drives that eat clock and give your defense time to rest. Jeremiyah Love has that ceiling. He's not a system running back who needs perfect blocking and ideal situations to produce. He's a playmaker who creates on his own, who makes defenders miss in phone booths, who turns negative plays into positive gains through sheer will and athleticism. And in an offense that already features elite receiving talent and competent quarterback play, adding that dimension could elevate Minnesota from playoff contender to legitimate Super Bowl threat. That's not hyperbole. That's what happens when all the pieces fit together and you've got weapons at every level that defenses simply cannot account for simultaneously. There's another wrinkle to this story that makes it even more interesting. Jadarian Price, another Notre Dame running back, has publicly stated that Minnesota would be an ideal landing spot for his services. Price represents a different profile than Love, more of a power runner with good hands rather than an explosive home run hitter. But the fact that Notre Dame backs are specifically targeting the Vikings tells you something about the organization's reputation and the appeal of this offensive system. Kevin O'Connell has built something special in Minneapolis, a scheme that maximizes talent and puts players in position to succeed, and running backs around the country recognize that opportunity. So here's the fork in the road that Vikings management faces over the next few weeks. Do they go big, trading up aggressively to land what they believe is an elite talent who can transform the offense for years to come? Or do they stay patient, hold on to their draft capital, and hope they can find adequate rushing production through later picks or free agency additions? There's no objectively correct answer. Both approaches have merit and both carry significant risk. Trade up for Love and miss, and you've wasted precious draft resources on a position that might not have warranted that investment. Stay put and watch Love become a star elsewhere, and you're left wondering what might have been, while your rushing attack continues to sputter and underwhelm. But while front office executives debate draft strategy and media talking heads argue about positional value, there's a more immediate issue facing this offense right now. A hole in the receiving core that needs filling, and it needs filling soon. Jalen Nailor is gone, And while his departure might not generate the same headlines as a quarterback battle or a potential blockbuster trade, anyone who watched Vikings games closely last season understands exactly how valuable he was to this offensive ecosystem. Naylor wasn't the flashy playmaker making highlight reel catches or dominating target share. He was the safety valve, the reliable third option who got open when defenses committed resources to stopping Jefferson and Addison. He was the possession receiver who moved the chains on third down, the guy who found soft spots in zone coverage and gave his quarterback an easy completion when primary reads were covered. Losing that reliability creates a very specific problem that needs addressing. Antonio Williams out of Clemson has emerged as a name that makes sense for multiple reasons. His skill set aligns almost perfectly with what Minnesota lost when Naylor departed. Williams is quick and precise, running short and intermediate routes. He's got excellent football IQ and understands how to work against zone coverage, finding those pockets between defenders where quarterbacks can deliver safe throws. He's dangerous after the catch, using elusiveness rather than pure speed to pick up yards after contact. And perhaps most importantly, he produced consistently at Clemson, showing up week after week with reliable hands and smart positioning. Those aren't sexy attributes that get analysts excited during pre-draft evaluations, but they're exactly what winning offenses need from their third and fourth receiving options. Williams finished his college career with impressive production, especially during his final season when he became a legitimate weapon in Clemson's passing attack. Plenty of receptions, multiple touchdowns, and consistent involvement regardless of opponent or game situation. That tells you something important about his reliability and his understanding of offensive concepts. He's not a guy who disappears for stretches or struggles against certain coverage schemes. He's a professional who executes his assignments and makes life easier for his quarterback, which is exactly what Kevin O'Connell's system demands from role players. Physically, Williams won't wow anyone with his measurables. He's not the biggest receiver or the fastest or the most explosive athlete, but football intelligence compensates for athletic limitations, and Williams has demonstrated repeatedly that he processes information quickly, recognizes defensive intentions, and adjusts his routes accordingly. In an offense that demands quick decision-making and precise execution, that cerebral approach translates beautifully. He won't need a year or two to learn the system and understand the nuances. He can plug in relatively quickly and contribute meaningful snaps from day one, which matters enormously for a team with championship aspirations that can't afford extended development timelines. Of course, there are legitimate concerns that need acknowledging. Williams has dealt with some injury issues during his college career, nothing catastrophic, but enough to raise red flags for NFL medical staffs. And the jump from college to professional football humbles even the most talented prospects, exposing weaknesses that didn't show up against inferior competition. Plenty of receivers who dominated on Saturdays have struggled mightily when facing NFL defensive backs who are bigger, faster, and infinitely more sophisticated in their coverage techniques. That's the gamble with every draft pick, the uncertainty that makes general managers earn their salaries. But here's the bottom line. Minnesota needs someone to fill the role Jalen Naylor occupied, and they need that person to be ready immediately without extensive development time. If defenses can key on Jefferson and Addison without worrying about other receiving threats, the entire passing attack becomes predictable and easy to defend. That's how offenses stagnate and quarterbacks get pressured into mistakes. Antonio Williams might not become a star, but he could walk into a clearly defined role that maximizes his strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. Sometimes fit matters more than raw talent, and sometimes the most important thing isn't finding the best available player, but finding the right player for your specific system and needs. There's also internal competition to consider. Other receivers on the roster will be fighting for that slot role, trying to prove they deserve increased playing time and target share. Nothing gets handed out in professional football. Every snap gets earned through practice performance and game execution. The competition will be fierce and unforgiving, which ultimately benefits the team even if it creates individual disappointment for players who don't win those battles. That's the nature of roster construction at the highest level. Now let's pivot to a perspective that adds fascinating context to everything happening in that quarterback room. Jalen Naylor, the recently departed receiver, didn't just quietly move on to his next destination. He spoke publicly about the quarterback competition, offering insights that only someone who spent time in that locker room could provide. And what he said should make Vikings fans sit up and pay attention, because this isn't speculation from media members or hot takes from analysts who've never been inside an NFL facility. This is first-hand knowledge from someone who watched these quarterbacks work daily, who saw their preparation habits, who understands their strengths and limitations. According to Naylor, the battle between J.J. McCarthy, Kyler Murray, and Carson Wentz is going to be absolutely intense. Not competitive, not spirited, intense. That word choice matters. It suggests a level of pressure and urgency that goes beyond normal training camp competition. It implies that all three quarterbacks genuinely believe they can win the job, that none of them view this as a foregone conclusion favoring one particular player. That kind of uncertainty creates an environment where every single rep matters, where no one can afford off days or lazy preparation. It's the kind of situation that either brings out the absolute best in competitors or exposes their limitations under pressure. But what really stands out from Naylor's comments is his personal belief in J.J. McCarthy. Despite all the attention focused on Kyler Murray's experience and Carson Wentz's system familiarity, Naylor sees something special in the young quarterback. He believes McCarthy has the tools, the mindset, and the trajectory to eventually become the franchise quarterback Minnesota needs. That endorsement carries weight precisely because Naylor has no reason to say it publicly unless he genuinely believes it. He's not on the team anymore. He's not campaigning for playing time or trying to curry favor with coaches. He's simply sharing his honest assessment based on what he observed daily in practice and meetings. However, Naylor also made something crystal clear. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is locked in. McCarthy might have immense potential, but potential means nothing without consistent execution and improvement. That's where the league-wide perspective differs significantly from Naylor's insider view. Most analysts and experts see Kyler Murray as the clear favorite to win this job. And frankly, that makes complete sense from a logical standpoint. Murray has started NFL games. He's faced playoff pressure. He's delivered in high-stakes situations. When you're trying to win now rather than develop for the future, you typically lean toward the proven commodity rather than the promising prospect. This creates a fascinating dynamic where internal optimism about McCarthy's potential collides with external expectations favoring Murray's experience. Both perspectives have validity, which is exactly why this competition remains so unpredictable and compelling. McCarthy represents upside and long-term potential. Murray represents immediate competence and proven production. And Wentz represents the ultimate insurance policy, a capable veteran who can step in if either of the top two options falters. From a roster construction standpoint, it's actually brilliant to have all three options available, even if managing those personalities and expectations becomes a delicate balancing act. Let's be completely honest about where McCarthy stands right now. He showed flashes late last season that generated genuine excitement about his development trajectory. He made throws that only elite quarterbacks can make. He demonstrated poise in pressure situations. He displayed the kind of processing speed and decision-making that can't be taught. But flashes and consistency are two entirely different things. Every young quarterback shows promise at some point. The ones who become stars are those who can sustain that level of play week after week, who can perform regardless of opponent or circumstance, who can avoid the crushing mistakes that derail drives and cost games. McCarthy hasn't proven he can do that yet at the NFL level, which is why training camp becomes absolutely critical for his development. Meanwhile, Kyler Murray enters with expectations stacked sky high. He wasn't brought to Minnesota to compete for a backup job or serve as a bridge quarterback. He's here to elevate the ceiling, to provide the kind of steady, competent quarterback play that gives talented rosters a chance to win championships. That means the clock is already ticking. There's no grace period or adjustment phase. From the moment he signed his contract, Murray became the betting favorite to start Week 1, and anything less than quality starting quarterback performance would be considered a disappointment for both him and the organization. And then there's Carson Wentz, lurking in the background like a horror movie villain who refuses to stay dead. If McCarthy stumbles and Murray disappoints, Wentz is right there, experienced and eager, ready to seize an opportunity that seemed to have passed him by. That three-way dynamic creates unpredictability that extends beyond just the quarterback position. It affects offensive line cohesion when they're not sure who they're blocking for long-term. It impacts receiver routes and timing when they're working with multiple different quarterbacks. It influences play calling and game planning when coaches don't know which signal caller's strengths they're building around. This isn't just a quarterback competition. It's a variable that touches every single aspect of offensive preparation and execution. Think about training camp through this lens. Every practice becomes a showcase. Every 7-on-7 period gets analyzed and debated. Every team drill gets broken down by coaches, teammates, and media members, looking for any indication of who's pulling ahead or falling behind. The pressure is immense and relentless, but that pressure is also necessary. Good teams need competitive depth that pushes everyone to improve. Complacency is the enemy of excellence, and no one in that quarterback room can afford to be complacent when two capable alternatives are ready to take their job at the first sign of weakness. Here's what people often overlook. This competition doesn't exist in a vacuum affecting only the three quarterbacks involved. It ripples through the entire offensive unit. Timing and chemistry between quarterbacks and receivers takes time and repetition to develop. When you're rotating three different signal callers through practice reps, that development gets fragmented. Offensive linemen need to understand their quarterback's cadence, snap count preferences, and protection adjustments. Running backs need to know blocking assignments and route concepts that might vary depending on who's under center. The entire offensive ecosystem gets impacted by uncertainty at the most important position, which is why teams typically try to establish a clear starter as early as possible and let everyone build chemistry around that decision. But Minnesota is deliberately choosing competition over clarity, at least for now. That suggests confidence in their coaching staff's ability to manage the situation without letting it devolve into dysfunction. Kevin O'Connell earned his reputation as an offensive innovator and quarterback developer. If anyone can navigate this complex situation while keeping all three competitors engaged and the offense functioning smoothly, it's probably him. But make no mistake, this is a high-wire act that could go wrong in multiple ways if not managed perfectly.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.